$60,000 gone, just like that, not stolen, not lost in a fire, not buried under an avalanche in the Alaskan wilderness. Just evaporated because the market decided overnight that something worth $60,000 is now worth $9. And the craziest part? Nobody saw it coming. I'm standing in minus 20-degree weather right now. My beard is frozen, my boots stopped feeling warm about 40 minutes ago, and I am looking at a Quonset hut that a man poured his savings into, his weekends into, his entire dream of escaping the rat race into, and he just sold it for $9,000 because he had no other choice. That number should make you angry. It should make you curious. And by the end of this video, it is going to make you one of two things. Either the smartest buyer in the room, or the person who finally understands why so many good men got burned chasing a dream they weren't prepared for. Because this is not just a story about a steel building in Alaska. This is a story about what happens when a market goes insane, when real people make real mistakes with real money, and when the dust finally settles, who actually wins? Stay with me, because the next 15 minutes might be the most valuable thing you watch this week. Let's go back. Not far. Just a few years. It is early in the pandemic. The entire world has shut down. Men who spent their whole lives commuting, clocking in, sitting under fluorescent lights and dying slowly inside. They are suddenly home, suddenly still, and in that stillness, something woke up in them. The dream of getting out. Search trend for off-grid living exploded overnight. YouTube channels about homesteading gained millions of subscribers in months. Forums dedicated to remote living, self-sufficiency, and escaping the city were flooded with men who had never held an axe, but were absolutely certain they were about to build a cabin in the woods. And right in the middle of all of that, the Quonset hut had its moment. If you have never heard of a Quonset hut, here is everything you need to know in 30 seconds. It is a prefabricated steel structure with an arched roof, originally designed by the United States military in World War II. The genius of it is the simplicity. No corners, no complex framing, just curved corrugated steel panels that bolt together like a giant puzzle. You can assemble one in days. It handles snow loads that would collapse a standard roof. It is nearly indestructible in wind. And in 2021, you could get a mid-size kit shipped to your property for around $30,000 to $40,000. For men dreaming of Alaska, of raw land, brutal winters, total independence, the Quonset hut was the answer to every question. It was fast. It was strong. It was built for exactly the kind of punishment that Alaska dishes out every single winter. So demand went vertical. Manufacturers could not keep up. Wait times stretched to 6, 8, 12 months. Prices climbed. A unit that cost $35,000 in 2020 was $58,000 by 2022. And men were still buying them because the dream was worth it. Because nothing was going to stop them until everything stopped them. Here's where the story gets brutal. And I am not going to soften this for you, because the men who are about to buy a Quonset hut right now need to hear the unfiltered truth. The off-grid bubble burst. Hard. When the world reopened. When offices called people back. When the reality of what remote living actually costs in time, money, and physical hardship hit men who had never done it before. The wave collapsed. The dreamers went back to their lives. The hobbyists put their plans on hold. And the market was suddenly flooded with inventory that nobody wanted to move at full price. But that was only the first hit. The second hit came from steel tariffs. New trade policies drove up the cost of raw materials sharply. And here's the brutal irony. Manufacturers had ramped up production during the boom to meet demand. They had warehouses full of steel panels, and nobody was ordering. So they had to choose between holding dead inventory or slashing prices to move it. Most of them slashed. The third hit was the one nobody talks about. The men who actually went to Alaska and tried to build. Look, Alaska is not a romantic backdrop. Alaska is a test. And a significant number of men who bought Quonset hut kits during the boom failed that test. Not because they were weak, but because they were unprepared for things nobody warned them about. Permitting in Alaska is not like permitting in the lower 48. It varies borough by borough. Some areas require engineered foundation plans, electrical inspections, septic approvals, and structural sign-offs before you can legally occupy a structure. That process can take a year. It can cost $15,000 in fees and professional services alone. Men who budgeted for the steel kit, and nothing else ran out of money before the building was even usable. Then there is the insulation problem. A raw Quonset hut shell is essentially a giant steel tube. In an Alaskan winter, that tube becomes a refrigerator. Spray foam insulation, which is the only method that actually works in these structures, costs between $8,000 and $20,000 depending on the size of the unit. If you skip it or cheap out, you get condensation. Condensation leads to mold. Mold in a sealed metal structure in a remote location is catastrophic and nearly impossible to remediate without gutting the interior entirely. Access was another killer. Men bought land cheap in remote areas, and remote in Alaska means genuinely remote, not a gravel road that feels bumpy, a potential absence of any road at all. Getting a heavy flatbed truck carrying steel panels to a remote parcel in interior Alaska can cost more than the kit itself. One man I spoke to spend $11,000 just on freight and rigging to get a structure to his land. That was not in his original budget. And heating. The heating costs alone in an improperly insulated metal building during an Alaskan winter are enough to make a grown man cry. We're talking about propane or oil costs that can run $1,500 to $2,000 a month in peak winter if your thermal envelope is not tight. So when you add it all up, the kit, the freight, the foundation, the insulation, the permitting, the utilities, men who thought they were buying a $58,000 homestead were suddenly looking at $140,000 projects they could not finish. And then the banks pulled out. Lenders who had been marginally willing to finance non-traditional structures in remote areas tightened their criteria dramatically. Property in areas without year-round road access, without established utility connections, without a traditional structure, they walked away from all of it, which meant the resale market became cash only. And cash buyers have the leverage to offer whatever they want. So a man sitting on a half-finished Quonset hut on remote Alaskan land, out of money, out of time, with a lender refusing to refinance, he takes $9,000 because $9,000 is better than zero. And right now, there are a lot of men in exactly that position. So, is $9,000 actually a deal? The honest answer is, it depends entirely on who you are and what you already have. Let me break down what $9,000 actually gets you in today's market. A typical entry-level Quonset hut kit at that price point is going to be a Q-model structure, meaning it has end walls included. You are looking at something in a range of 20 feet wide by 30 to 40 feet long, which gives you 600 to 800 square feet of usable floor space. The steel gauge is usually 14 gauge, which is solid for most applications. You'll get the arch panels, the end wall framing, the hardware, and basic instructions. That is it. Everything else is on you. Now compare that to what a comparable enclosed space costs you in traditional construction. A standard stick-built structure is 600 square feet in a remote Alaskan setting. When you factor in lumber, labor, foundation, roofing, and windows, you're looking at a minimum of $80,000 to $120,000, and it will not handle the snow loads a Quonset handles. It will not go up in days the way a Quonset does, and it will not last 50 years with minimal maintenance the way a well-built steel arch structure will. A shipping container comparison is equally stark. A used 40-foot container costs $3,000 to $5,000, but converting it into a livable or functional space requires significant modification. Cutting openings, reinforcing walls after cuts, insulating, ventilating, and the total project cost typically exceeds $30,000 before it is truly functional. So the raw kit at $9,000 is extraordinary value. If, and this is a significant if, you approach it correctly. Here is the real number you need to plan around. If you're buying a $9,000 Quonset hut kit and you want a finished functional, code-compliant structure, in Alaska, you need to budget a minimum of $40,000 to $60,000 total. Here is where that money goes. Freight and delivery. Depending on your location, plan for $3,000 to $8,000. A gravel pad foundation with proper drainage runs $6,000 to $12,000. Spray foam insulation for full interior is $8,000 to $18,000 depending on size. End wall framing, doors, and windows add $4,000 to $7,000. Electrical and heating systems run $5,000 to $15,000 depending on your off-grid or grid-tied setup. Permitting and professional fees vary by borough, but budget $3,000 to $8,000 minimum. That total, $40,000 to $60,000. builds you a structure that is dry, warm, legal, and genuinely usable in one of the harshest environments on the planet. Against a $140,000 traditional build, it is still an extraordinary deal, but you must go in with clear eyes about what that $9,000 number actually represents. It is the starting line, not the finish line. Now, let me tell you what happens to the men who get this wrong. Not to scare you off, but because understanding the failure patterns is the only way to avoid repeating them. The men who got burned in the Alaskan Quonset boom almost universally shared one characteristic. They fell in love with a dream before they respected the reality. They watched YouTube videos of beautiful finished homesteads and assumed the journey from raw kit to finished structure was a weekend project. It is not. Assembling a Quonset hut properly, with correct bolt torque, proper panel alignment, and sealed end walls, typically takes 2 to 4 men working hard for 3 to 5 days minimum. That is just the shell. The interior work that follows is months of skilled labor. They underestimated Alaska's permit environment because they compared it to states they had experience with. A man who built a garage in Texas and sailed through permits assumed Alaska would be similar. It is not. Alaska has some of the most complex and variable building regulations in the country, and in many boroughs. The enforcement is strict enough that an unpermitted structure can be ordered demolished regardless of how much money you have sunk into it. They bought land site unseen based on satellite imagery. Satellite imagery does not show you permafrost. It does not show you seasonal flooding. It does not show you the soil composition that makes a standard gravel pad foundation impossible and forces you into engineered pilings that cost $30,000 alone. Men who bought land without a ground-level assessment in person, in all seasons if possible, got destroyed by site conditions they never anticipated, and they trusted their enthusiasm over their spreadsheet. Every man who failed at this had a moment early in the process where the numbers did not add up, and instead of stopping to recalculate, they pushed forward on optimism. Alaska does not reward optimism. Alaska rewards preparation. So, who should actually buy a Quonset hut right now? Because the opportunity is genuinely real for the right man. If you already own land in Alaska or the rural Northwest, land with confirmed road access, known soil conditions, and a clear permitting pathway, a $9,000 Quonset hut kit is one of the best deals available in the current market. You are buying the hardest part of the structure, the shell, at a fraction of what would have cost 2 years ago. Everything else is labor and materials you control. If you have construction experience, if you have framed buildings, poor foundations, run electrical, or worked in the trades, you are in a powerful position. The labor costs that crush unprepared buyers are largely your own time. A man with real construction skills can build out a Quonset hut interior for $15,000 in materials that would cost a general contractor $60,000 to execute. If you are buying for storage, workshop, or agricultural use rather than residential occupancy, the permitting complexity drops dramatically. A non-residential accessory structure on rural land in most Alaskan boroughs faces far fewer regulatory hurdles than a primary dwelling. If you have equipment to store, a business that needs covered workspace, or a homestead that needs a large outbuilding, right now is possibly the best time in a decade to buy. If you are willing to build slowly and without financial pressure, if you can treat this as a multi-year project funded incrementally from savings rather than a race to occupancy, you will avoid every trap that caught the men who failed during the boom. The men who succeed at off-grid building in Alaska are almost never the fastest. They are the ones who never run out of money. Here is the larger truth that this entire market moment is pointing at. The men who panic sold their Quonset huts for $9,000, they are not failures as men. They walked into something unprepared, underfinanced, and overconfident. That is a planning failure, not a character failure. But the lessons from their experience are worth more than any kit price. Alaska does not bend to your timeline. It does not care about your vision board or your YouTube channel or your follower count. It operates on its own schedule, in its own conditions, with its own brutal standards. The men who thrived are the ones who learned those standards before they committed their savings to the dream. The $9,000 Quonset hut sitting in the snow right now is either a monument to someone's unpreparedness or a foundation of someone else's future. What it becomes depends entirely on who picks it up next, and whether that man did his homework. The price crashed because the dreamers left. The price will eventually recover because the builders will arrive. The question is which one you are. If you are the man who has the land, the skills, the patience, and the financial discipline to approach this correctly, the current market is handing you something remarkable. The storm that wiped out the unprepared has also cleared the field. There is less competition, more inventory, and sellers who are genuinely motivated. That combination does not last forever. But if you are still in the dream phase, still watching videos, still picturing the finished homestead without a concrete plan for how you get there, do not spend $1 yet. Spend the next 6 months in research, in site visits, in conversations with men who have actually built in Alaska. Learn the permitting reality in the specific borough where your land is or will be. Get a soil assessment. Get freight quotes from actual carriers to your actual location. Build a real budget with a 30% contingency built in. Because the worst thing that can happen is not that you miss this window. The worst thing is that you jump through it unprepared and become the next man selling a half-finished dream for $9,000 in the snow. This market will not stay broken forever. Steel prices will stabilize. The next generation of off-grid seekers is already growing up watching channels exactly like this one. In 5 years, the men who bought smart in 2025 and 2026 are going to be sitting in finished, warm, paid-off structures talking about how they got in at the bottom. The men who waited too long or moved too fast or skipped the homework, they are going to be watching those videos wishing they had made a different decision. You are watching this video right now, which means you are already ahead of most people. You are asking the questions before you spend the money. That is the first and most important step. Do not waste it. Get your land situation locked. Understand your borough's permit process inside and out. Price out your freight, your foundation, your insulation, your utilities. And when that number makes sense, when the total project cost against the value of the finished structure makes genuine financial sense, move with confidence. Alaska rewards the prepared. The Quonset hut market right now is one of the clearest opportunities for a prepared man that this decade has produced. The only thing standing between you and that opportunity is the work of getting ready. Let me know in the comments if you found this helpful, and subscribe for more videos about how to survive cold winters.